Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. Today, I have invited Matt Simpson to join me. Matt is an executive recruiter from Blackbook Executive, which he co-founded in 2011 with the intention of providing a specialised and personal recruitment consulting service to individuals and businesses across Australia and New Zealand. Matt has over 25 years of recruitment experience in the UK and Australia, and has actively recruited for major names such as Asahi, Inghams, Fonterra, McCormick, McCains and Tassal, to name just a few. He now leads a team of recruiters at Blackbook Executive, specialising in the recruitment of roles across engineering, marketing, sales, procurement, supply chain, tech, and science and safety. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks for having me on.
Matt, look, I really wanted to get you on today because it's as we speak today, it's June 2024. We're hearing a lot from our clients that the market's really tough out there at the moment. Many of our exec clients are finding it pretty hard to even get an interview at the moment. So really keen to, hear what you're hearing and seeing from your clients, because you're on the ground talking to them every day. But also to perhaps give some tips to our listeners on how they can best work with recruiters and leverage off that relationship. So, keen to know, what are you hearing from your clients at the moment?
It's been a very interesting, I'd say, last 12 months. I think, actually, I'll go back even further. I think there was a norm of recruitment industry up until COVID, and then we saw a very big decline, and then in terms of job opportunities, and then an absolute peak that I've never seen before in my career. And then since then, it's actually normalised somewhat to pre-COVID to a pre-COVID market. And I think that right now as we speak, we see a range of different industries and a range of different businesses have still a different view around talent and bringing new talent into their organization. And then on the flip side, some organizations that are actually starting to think about cost control and letting people go. So it's a very interesting market, and one we probably haven't seen for a handful of years.
So would you say that there is a difference in the volume of roles coming in at different levels, like from, junior level roles compared to your mid-career versus exec?
I think that there is industry-wise and also function-wise, there is absolute discrepancy in terms of quantity of work and new roles coming through in the marketplace. If I was to think a little bit more about Blackbook and where we're currently at, I've probably been, and this might surprise a lot of people, but as a specialist in particularly around supply chain operations, engineering, sales and marketing, we're actually seeing some of those pockets still be very, very busy. Like, for instance, supply chain, and I've probably had more executive supply chain roles on in the last probably 6 months than I have, at the back end of 2023. So whilst I'm busy, the mid-market, that mid-management to senior management level has probably been quieter than what we've seen for some 18 months. And that's really an area, particularly in bigger organizations, where I think they're seeing as cost control and headcount reduction areas.
Interesting. And do you think it's anything to do with the time of year? Like, would there be some recruitment freezes on potentially until they get budget in the next financial year?
I think in the past, and again, I'll preface it by saying pre-COVID, we used to see a little bit of a lull prior to end of financial year, the Australian end of financial year, and then an increase once budgets got released and headcount numbers got released that people started recruiting again come July and August. I think that we're just in a very interesting marketplace at the moment, and I recently went to an industry discovery session where we heard a lot about where current markets are, particularly around both state, function, and industry. And there was a real discrepancy in terms of where some industries are actually booming and still there's talent shortage, through to some industries where there's absolutely, or functions, I should say, where they're shedding numbers and applications are through the roof.
So can you give us some light on what those areas are? Like, where would be the roles where it's really, industries or shop functions where it's really competitive right now?
IT and technology is one area, and particularly in big organisations, and mainly in Victoria and New South Wales, where we're seeing that their job ads are a lot down compared to the previous couple of years. And applications are through the roof, that numbers that they've never seen before. Finance was another area where things have dropped right off again in comparison to the previous couple of years. And even some of the other shared service functions such as HR, marketing, and sales to some respect has dropped off somewhat. On the flip side, you still see, and again, I'm just trying to recall some of the numbers, but healthcare is still up. Social services are still up, in terms of talent shortage and more jobs than there are applications, just in terms of trends anyway. And then some of the areas around supply chain, and specifically within FMCG and retail, you're still starting to see. You're still seeing there's volume in that space.
So, Matt, if you're recruiting an exec role in supply chain, just as an example, what sort of numbers in terms of applications would you be getting?
That's a really interesting one. So what I tend to do when I actually have a role, and I'll use an example of one recently with a $500 million listed retailer, where I recruited their head of supply chain, and we put that through a couple of different advertising mediums, where I'm going to roughly say had applications of up to about 150 people. But then outside of that, we obviously use our own networks, referral base, headhunting techniques to probably look at a pool of overall maybe 200 plus people.
Okay, that's a significant pool. And I imagine in tech at the moment, it might be double that for some roles. Would that be right?
I think so too. And even if I gave another example of a role we did recently in Western Australia for a state-based manager of a service, just the Seek ad that we ran and our own Blackbook advertisement through our own website, I think we had 350 applications.
Wow,
which is huge, and that's hard to work through too. But obviously, when you're engaged with a client and trying to support those candidates and give them the service that they want, you have to do the volume of work.
Okay, that leads me on to my next question. Applicant tracking systems. I know most agencies use something like Job Adder, at least to get through, to help screen some of those applications. Do you use an ATS at Blackbook?
We do. So we've got a couple of systems. We use Job Adder to put our advertisements out, and we're able to actually use several job boards through Job Adder. Then outside of that, we use LinkedIn to advertise our roles, most of our roles. or also our own website. But it all gets funneled into the same process, and then we actually have a database that we manage, in terms of suitability. And then once the candidate is interviewed, their notes and their data goes onto that system.
Can you explain from a recruiter point of view, how do you use Job Adder for screening? Like, do you actually, as a recruiter, physically look at 300 applications, or would you read 50 of them? Can you explain that process? Yeah. I think it's a bit of a mystery what happens behind the scenes.
Sure. And I'll also touch on that. I think this area is going to be a very interesting space going forward with AI coming through, and a lot of people talking to us about what tools we have and how we manage AI through our candidate application systems. But right now, as we speak at Blackbook, and everyone's been trained the same way, that we personally review every candidate that applies to a role, that whether that's through any means that we have, and we try and match that candidate against the job brief that we've gone through with our clients. So whether it's a very specialised role where you might only get 30 applications, through to a more general role similar to the WA role, which I mentioned, 300 applications. And it's just been really clear around understanding the job brief that we've been given by our client to match up, experience, qualifications, skills, some of the achievements that people might have had that are aligned to what our client is looking for. Then the next stage of the process, obviously, is the important one where you're able to flesh that out through interviewing and then learn about the candidate's competencies and behaviours that it might be aligned to that job and business as well.
No. So does Job Adder rank the candidates at all in your system using any keywords, or how do you use it as a screening tool?
So we only use it as a collation of CVs, and then we use human behaviour or skills to actually assess ourselves. So again, I think that it's obviously we are still very personal touch recruitment firm, and I think you get that a lot with very specialised firms such as Blackbook, that we actually train our staff, and I've been that way for all my career, that we actually look at those candidates against the brief and then make connection. And there might be times where we actually do very small interviews, such as phone screening, to assess a little bit further before committing to a full-blown interview.
Okay, great. And when you're reviewing those CVs, people say that recruiters only take 6 seconds to look at your resume. How accurate do you think is that statement?
I'll talk about myself personally. I think that there's an element where I'm very clear, and years of experience has given me the skill to be able to assess quickly. I think 6 seconds might be pushing it a little bit. I do spend a fair bit of time reviewing people's CVs and going back in history to make sure that I'm not missing something, and both for the client and also the candidate. So, but I can absolutely see, and I think that this is where perhaps technology and AI is moving towards, in more lower level roles or entry level roles, or roles where you might be able to apply terminology and words that might be able to flesh out some of those CVs for suitability, will actually start being more and more seen within our industry.
So when you are reviewing against your criteria, what can candidates do to make that job easier for you to match them to the role?
This is a very tough one, because we do get several candidates that apply to just about everything. And I personally get candidates that apply to nearly every role I advertise. And to answer your question, I think that sometimes reading the advertisement and reading the criteria of what what the business is looking for in terms of skills, experience, and we try to be very descriptive around that, so that people are aware of what we're really looking for and looking to recruit. that you align your CV to show that. So one thing I've constantly giving feedback to candidates on is whether they're right for a role. And I do get a lot of people that get a bit upset that they don't go through to the next stage. And when they call me or when they send me an email, and I like to get on the phone and talk through that there's no alignment to that from their background to the criteria of what my client is looking for. So being really clear around that. Sometimes, and I know that there's some roles out there that are a bit broader in terms of background and skill set and competencies that businesses are looking for. But then just thinking a little bit about how you can still get your message across in a really clear and simple format is going to be critical to making that next stage of the process.
We hear from clients often that, employers want a unicorn, that there's just so many requirements that it's almost impossible to meet every requirement. How many do you think if people match 70%, 80%, like do they need to meet absolutely every criteria listed in a job ad?
I think, again, it's going to be dependent on the role. And it's also going to be dependent on the level that the role is being recruited. You're right. I think that as we've come out of a very talent short time coming out of COVID, where businesses needed to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more open to a different skill set or experience or behavior, we've moved back towards pre-COVID times where, I've got many clients that say, must tick 9 out of 10 boxes. And that's a challenge to recruit. And, from our perspective, our job is to actually help them open up their eyes in terms of thinking a little bit about skills and experiences and where people might come from to ensure that we're opening up the pool of candidates to both our client, but also from a candidate perspective, giving them the opportunity to actually attain a really good role in the marketplace as well. It's just really tough. And I think that the frustration for a lot of candidates absolutely see this, that businesses are saying no to people because they miss one or two key things that they're looking for, but don't even get the opportunity to actually discuss that. Must be very frustrating. And I think that that's actually fun enough where a good recruitment firm and a good recruiter that they align to can actually help them step through that.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, as you and I both know, it's not always the case.
No.
I hear from clients all the time, recruiters don't call me back. I meet with them, then I never hear from them again. As an ex-recruiter, I tend to defend recruiters because I know how busy you are and how difficult it is to call every single person back. How many calls would you get a day?
When I'm active with a range of roles, I could get 20, 25 calls a day. And then on top of that, given we've moved to text messaging and emailing, another 25 messages from different forms as well. So there's a lot to return. And I've always had, I think that this is perhaps why I've had a long career in recruitment. We are in the relationship game, and one of the key things I've always told myself is you've got to return everyone's phone call, or you've got to get back to everyone, because as a candidate, to understand the experience that they're going through too is tough. And when they're searching for that next role and they don't hear back from someone that they constantly try and call, it must be a terrible feeling. So I have had that focus, but at the same time, sometimes you can't get back to everyone. I think that with the years of experience that I've been in the space that I have been in, there's some people that know that if they leave a message for me or send me an email and I don't return it for a week or two, they know that either that role that we initially touched on hasn't progressed further, or if they're just looking for a market update, then I'm busy, in some areas, and eventually we'll connect at some stage. But trying to get that across to everyone and understand from a candidate's perspective that that's what we're doing is hard sometimes.
Very challenging, I'm sure. A couple of questions around engaging with recruiters. So as a first point of contact. So if I was an executive, I'm wanting to connect with you because I've heard, you recruit roles in my industry, but you're not actually advertising anything suitable for me right now. What would be the best way for me to connect with you?
I'm a little bit old school in the sense of, a conversation, whether it's 5 to 10 minutes over the phone is a really good starting point. Now, I might not move to that next stage of organising for a coffee catch up, or an interview specifically about a role straight away. But at least having that initial discussion and presenting a CV that I can retain and keep an eye on the marketplace for is the first point of call. I think that on top of that, simple things of connecting, on LinkedIn, be it just through conversation and emails, as well as connecting to a company that you trust in recruitment, such as Blackbook. You can start seeing the activity that's happening in that spot in our areas and where a lot of the work's coming through. So that's probably the two streams that I'd initially start with, and then just staying on top of that and working out the momentum of how often you should keep in contact with someone like myself is important from there.
So I always explain, if you have an initial conversation but you don't have any suitable roles, you're probably not going to be calling them every couple of weeks to let them know. How often would you recommend someone touches base with you? Would it be like an email once a month just to let you know they're still available? Like, how do you prefer to maintain that contact?
I think it is monthly, Leah. I think that I think anything more than that might become a little bit too hard basket for a recruiter to keep on top of. And I think that monthly piece sort of reminds us that they're still interested in hearing opportunities, and they've either had something come up, or they're still passively or actively sourcing the marketplace. And that might be a phone call or an email, just to keep that connection there. And then outside of that, it'd just be a matter of keeping an eye on that recruiter's roles that they come through, whether it's through our own website, LinkedIn, or other platforms that arise.
Okay, good. One thing I meant to ask you previously, we're talking about when you're assessing applications, cover letters. Do you read cover letters? And when the market is competitive, would a candidate who has gone to the trouble of writing a tailored cover letter, would that help them perhaps stand out from equally good competition?
It's a really good question. I think that, and I'd be interested to hear other executive recruiters, their opinion on this. Personally, myself, I don't read cover letters. I tend to jump straight to the CV and look for experience, skill set, achievements, and alignment to the brief that I'm recruiting. I think that the cover letter tends to be fleshed out through the interview process once you've got over that hurdle of alignment.
Yeah, I always say don't necessarily worry about cover letters for a recruitment agency, but if you're applying direct to a client, then perhaps that's more important because you can really tailor it to why you want to work for that company. Would you agree? Do your clients appreciate a cover letter that's tailored?
I think that's absolutely spot on. And again, I know that some of those clients that tend to go direct when they run or recruit, they do get a lot of applications as well. So I think, to your point, if you can actually tailor a succinct cover letter that outlines why they're interested and what experiences they might have that would suit that role, absolutely beneficial to your recruitment to your application process.
Another question about LinkedIn. I know when I get a phone call from a client, first thing I'm doing while usually speaking to them is looking them up on LinkedIn. Do you use LinkedIn also as part of your screening process? Like, once you get to a short list of people, would you be looking to see if LinkedIn is consistent with what's on the resume, or how do you use LinkedIn as part of that process?
So LinkedIn makes up another tool where we actually look at pooling our candidates to ensure that we're covering every basis when recruiting for a client. Outside of that, we don't tend to align, CV to experience. It's very much an ability to go and find someone that might not be within our network or applying to roles on Seek. So it's a really important part of our process, but just another tool that we use to ensure that we're covering the overall marketplace.
Right. So you're using LinkedIn to find your passive candidates, your candidates that
Yes.
aren't actively looking for roles.
Yes. So there is a recruiter part to LinkedIn where you can actually do specific searches for people. So I think that a good message I'd pass on to people that are in the marketplace is to make sure that they're updating their profiles. Really thinking a little bit about setting up their keywords in terms of when they describe their experience, so that if any recruiter does a specific keyword search, that they might arise in that search, so they're not getting missed out. I think that where I see a lot of people who haven't been in the marketplace for some time and have very basic LinkedIn profiles and want to start talking to recruiters, miss out on good opportunities is when they haven't updated their profile on LinkedIn. So whilst it's not the be all and end all, I think that it's a critical part to any candidate that's starting to look in the marketplace.
Yeah, particularly at that executive level, I think it's really important to have we call it future focused profiles. So it's keyword optimized for what they want to do next rather than things they've done in the past.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that sometimes it gets forgotten about, and it's a big journey for anyone that might not have been in the marketplace for some time, how much it's changed from when they perhaps were looking for that next job.
What would you say have been the biggest changes that you've seen in the last 5 years?
I think that there's no doubt that technology is driving that change. I think that, I think that the other thing is of knowing who to connect with in terms of a good recruitment firm, because I think that sometimes, whilst there's a lot of businesses that still want to recruit themselves, I think there's still a reliance on recruitment firms at all levels of an organization. And so knowing who to connect with and when and how often is going to be critical. And then the other piece is just to ensure that you know how to market yourself. And what I mean by that is just presenting yourself. Some people still don't emphasize the importance of actually having a really succinct, well-written CV to ensure that you are actually presenting yourself in the best manner to get over that first hurdle of someone's reviewing your suitability for a job. Hey, I want to meet that person. So I think that they're probably the key things that I would say. I think that, particularly on that last point, I think that sometimes people don't spend enough time marketing themselves on paper.
I agree. So it's really the storytelling, isn't it? They've got to have a narrative that flows from their resume, cover letter, if they're writing one, right through the interview with really specific examples of, how they have demonstrated those key capabilities you're looking for in the past.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other top tips for people out there to help them cut through the noise, particularly in those more competitive areas?
Just to touch on the CV side of things is to ensure that you are adjusting, not making up, obviously, but adjusting your CV per role that you want to apply for. Don't over apply to specific recruiters, because I think that the hard thing is when you become someone that is a serial applier to roles, you get branded, from a recruitment point of view as that pest, and you don't want to be that person because you still obviously want to offer something. So align yourself with someone that you trust. Think about how you want to engage with them, and then make sure that you are selective and adjust that CV when you put your application through.
Great advice, Matt. Thank you for joining me today. Really great to chat with you, and good luck for the rest of the year at Blackbook. I might
Thanks, Leah. Great to be on.
See you, Matt. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.